We continue our reading in the Bushman's Guide, and our reading today is What is Faith? Faith is one of the most common things in life. It is bound up with almost everything we do. A man becomes ill and sends for a doctor. He does so because he believes that the doctor will be able to diagnose the trouble and find a remedy. He has faith in the doctor who prescribes for him. He cannot read the prescription, but he does not suspect that it may be poison. He trusts the doctor in the matter. The prescription is made up by a chemist. The patient does not know what the chemist puts into the bottle, but he has sufficient faith to believe that the chemist will do his work thoroughly. So he takes the medicine, though he knows nothing about it, nor does he understand how it will work in his body. He takes it by faith. The same principle applies to still more common things. The purchase and eating of food would hardly be possible if we felt it necessary to have samples analyzed before we could safely eat anything. Even then, we would have to exercise faith in accepting the report of the analytical chemist. If we could not trust his word, could we find anyone else on whom we could rely? In daily work, we have sufficient faith to believe that arrangements made will be carried out, wages will be paid, and other conditions fulfilled week by week. A farmer sows his seed by faith. Even though buried out of sight and apparently lost, he believes that it will amply repay him for his outlay. By faith, he sees the harvest long before it is ready to be gathered in. And so by faith, he spends his money and toil and waits. By faith, the fisherman casts his nets, and the prospector seeks for gold. By faith, all worthwhile achievements in history have been brought to pass. The inventor sees with his mind's eye the machine that will reduce toils or safeguard human life, or speed up transport, or fill some other need. Others may scoff, but the man of faith sees further than their short-sighted perception. By faith, he sees the possibility and toils on, refusing to be discouraged or turned aside until at last the dream becomes a reality. Australia has had numberless examples of magnificent faith, withstanding adversity of many kinds, persevering through droughts while sheep and cattle are dying, pastures withering and hope fading. Faith has conquered the dangers and difficulties of pioneering and the subsequent trials of depression, floods, bushfires, droughts, and other barriers to success. Within the sacred circle of home life, faith plays an indispensable part. The husband and wife cannot be happy without faith. If there is no foundation of trust in each other, what else is left? The little newborn baby turns instinctively to his mother, and his infant needs are met. He does not understand where his food comes from, but his little mind rests content because he implicitly trusts his mother. "What man is there of you," asked the Son of God, "whom, if his son ask bread, will he give him a stone?" Who would disappoint the trust of a little child? And often faith rises to heights of nobility and greatness. A wife waiting for her drunken husband, tending her little ones, covering her husband's misdeeds, is a shining example of faith and love. The lack of faith can only mean inactivity and despair in our own lives. But towards others, a lack of faith can only mean mistrust. Can we wound or insult anyone more than to say, "I do not trust you"? Or in other words, "You are not worthy to be trusted"? And as without faith, it is impossible to please human beings, so also without faith it is impossible to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Hebrews 11:6. What a difference it makes when you find someone who trusts you wholeheartedly. Though we may not realize it, faith is one thing for which we crave above most other things, and it is faith for which God is seeking too. When a man long ago had been healed of his blindness, he was put out of the presence of the rulers because he boldly spoke out for the one who healed him. When Christ found him again, He looked past the qualities of honesty, courage, and faithfulness to something deeper down and asked, "Dost thou believe on the Son of God?" John 9:35. Here is the great question which is being asked of all mankind, the one thing that God longs to hear from each one of us. In a world, for the most part, does not love or trust Him, the question comes softly and searchingly to you and me. Dost thou believe on the Son of God? Will you trust Him to be your Savior, your Lord, and your King? And on the answer to that question hang the issues of life and death, heaven and hell. For says the voice that never lies, He that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life, and he that believeth not the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. John 3:36. To God be the glory.